polling is a snapshot in time. The debate continues, and we'll see whether numbers move or change as a result of the continuing debate.
Well, here's the latest snapshot from the Fox News Opinion Dynamics poll, and there you see health care reform legislation in favor of at 34%, a little drop from July. Oppose rises 2 points to 49%. Also, highest priority for the government right now, 57% in the all category say reduce the deficit, and you see how it breaks down by ideology there. So let's bring in our panel. Peter Morici, economist and from the University of Maryland business professor. Kirsten Powers, columnist of the New York Post, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Peter, welcome. First time on the panel.
Nice to be with you.
What do you think as the polls show that the debate seems to have shifted, what this means for the White House and where this stands now?
Well, the president's in a lot of trouble. He really hasn't addressed the basic problems in health care, malpractice insurance being one, high drug costs. He seems to be cutting deals with the principal players, but not making a lot of headway. Citizens suspect that this is going to be a very expensive program, and they're going to end up dumped into national health care.
Kirsten, is the White House treading water here? Are they concerned?
If they're not concerned, they should be concerned, I think. I think once you have the president having to try to convince you he's not going to kill your grandmother, you're in trouble. And that's kind of where he's gotten. And I think that they underestimated what was going to happen from the conservative side. To me, it's very similar to immigration, frankly, immigration reform, where there are real fears out there, and conservatives really tapped into them and were able to stop immigration reform through like talk radio, essentially. Now this time they're doing it through town halls, and they're going out and they're really making a lot of trouble for the White House, and I don't think they were anticipating it.
So was it a strategic error to talk about the town halls as they did from the podium, and how they've handled this up until now?
Well, I think they tried to exploit the fact that there was rowdiness, and I shared the view that that would actually hurt the opponents of health care reform as presented by the Democrats, but the polling has shown the opposite. It has shown that the reaction that people see in the town halls has strengthened opposition. And that tells you that even though the Obama team is very good at street fighting, at one-on-one hand combat in campaign style, which they showed last year, when they're up against the fury of ordinary Americans, that doesn't work the way it does when you're up against the Clintons.
Well, the USA Today poll had 57% saying that, including 6 in 10 independents, that a major factor behind the protests were concerns that average citizens had. And that was a big mistake that the Democrats made by trying to turn this into something that it was. Is it true that people who are there are conservatives? Probably. But look, I think most Americans think it's good when you go out and you protest the government and you show up and you actually care enough. When they protest the war, they certainly think it's a good idea.
Peter, the other question is what the president's saying out on the stump, if you call it the stump, in that he says he's not going to sign anything that increases the deficit. However, the bills that we have on the table so far do just that.
Well, they're certainly going to cost a lot of money, and his credibility is hurting. For example, his budget projections assume a 4% growth rate. No private economist would sign on to that. Over and over again, the president behaves as though he's campaigning, and the campaign facts only have to be colorable. When you're president, people research what you do. The Congressional Budget Office runs the numbers, and they don't add up for this president, so he's in a lot of trouble. He wants to spend too much of the people's money for too little results.
Another issue is what he's saying about doctors. Take a listen to this from the town hall this week.
If a family care physician works with his or her patient to help them lose weight, modify diet, monitors whether they're taking their medications in a timely fashion, they might get reimbursed a pittance. But if that same diabetic ends up getting their foot amputated, that's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 immediately. The surgeon is reimbursed. Well, why not make sure that we're also reimbursing the care that prevents the amputation, right? That will save us money.
Well, That is not sitting well with the AMA, the American Medical Association, a group that the president cites as supporting his health care reform. Here, surgeons are not paid $30,000 to $50,000 to amputate a diabetic's foot. Medicare pays a surgeon on average $541 to $708 for 1 or 2 procedures involving a foot amputation. The American College of Surgeons says that remark was ill-informed and dangerous, as well as the remark he said a couple of weeks ago about taking children's tonsils out. So, Charles, what about this and how much this is hurting?
Well, when the president is off in talking about the fee for an amputation, off by a factor of at least 30, he's got trouble, and it makes people worry about all his other so-called facts. Remember, he's been selling here for free lunch. He says the way I'm going to solve the problem is prevention. We're going to put a lot of money in prevention. It's going to save a lot of money overall. In fact, there was a letter from the head of the CBO to a congressman last Friday, which explicitly looked at prevention issues and said that, in fact, overall, when you pour money into prevention, it increases the cost of medicine. And the reason is you have to screen and treat the millions of people who don't end up with that disease, and there's a very small number who are helped. So even though it helps the individual, it saves on the individual. As a society, has been shown in a couple of studies, major studies, this prevention is a fantasy. It's a good thing to do, but it does not save any money.
All right, from the other point of view, Kirsten, if you're in the White House, how do you turn this around?
Well, I think I've said this before, that I don't know if they can turn it around, but there are a lot of people I've talked to who think that they can, and they say, look, all the major players are still at the table. You know, you have the pharmaceutical companies, you have the AMA, you have them at the table still. You still have the numbers in Congress.
Although you have the AMA putting out statements like that,
but
that
still
really
supporting
help.
reform. You know, is not people who were completely against it before, who are now spending money actually to try to get this passed. So, you know, I think there are a lot of people who think that he can basically ram it through. You know, I just feel like you get one bite at the apple usually, and you know, now they're kind of having to clean up and come back around, and you know, I think it just remains to be seen what's going to happen.
All right, quickly, Peter, do they get a bill in the fall?
They're going to get some kind of bill because they're not going to let their president fail. But it may be very scaled back. If it's what they have now, it'll be a classic case of elitism overwhelming the will of the people. Folks just don't have confidence in this program. It would be a terrible mistake on the part of the Democrats to push through something big.
Okay, we'll take a look at where we are with the president's stimulus package when we come back.